Welcome back to RGR Football. This is a bonus episode that is the audio of one of my radio appearances around the country put onto a video format. So if you like, all you have to do is start the video, minimize, and go about your day, and you'll hear my latest appearance.
Welcome back in Almost Entirely Sports here on ESPN Kansas City. If you're in Independence or not, the prize for everyone is Ryan Tracy joining us right now. Ryan's one of the hosts of the Locked On Chiefs podcast, been on this show, I think one other time before. It always surprises me, Ryan, that we haven't talked more, and so I'm going to go ahead and start with this question that I feel like is really going to cut to the heart of all of the good Chiefs coverage we can get to, which is, if you were able to consecutively pick up a football and throw it from one point to the next point, and you pick it up where it landed, then you do it again, how many times do you have to throw a football to get it to go 70 yards?
Yeah, me about 70.
That's extremely good. I like to think that I could do it in 3. I think probably between 4 and 70 would be much more probable. But how have you enjoyed the Patrick Mahomes development? Have you found yourself trying to maybe limit excitement here or there? Have you gone full in? Are you seeing the development that you were hoping you'd see at this point in the preseason?
You know, I've been the voice of reason, and let's put the brakes on a little bit, at least as far as the podcast goes. But I have to say that I am happy with his progression. I think what we've seen, especially on the interception side, which is probably my biggest concern, is that that last one was bad, but he was making more of them in practice earlier in preseason, so it looks like I see some progression out of him, and I think really that long touchdown is just coming to fruition what everybody had expectations of.
Yeah, and so in a way, and actually Mahomes said that the throw I'm about to mention was actually more difficult, but I do think it's reasonable to say that touchdown was less surprising or maybe less important to who he is as a quarterback than the one that he threw to Travis Kelce on 3rd and long, where that ball was leaving his hand before Travis Kelce left his break. I think it's fair to look at that play and then to look ahead to tomorrow's game and be looking for and hopefully seeing a pretty good example of everybody in that offense coming together on the same page. Are you happy with how that appears to be coming together?
Yes, that looks good to me. I'm looking for a little bit more out of Watkins, honestly, because we've seen a little bit of a slow start, but that level of precision that throw to Kelce showed you is that they can move the chains consistently, down in and down out, and you don't have to struggle and then try to hit a long pass. I think that consistency is going to be good for them.
You led me right to the next thing I want to talk about, which is Sammy Watkins. I'm far from pushing the panic button. He's been with 1,000 offensive coordinators throughout his relatively, not long NFL career at this point. It just sort of feels like he's been in the league forever because he's now on his 3rd team. But are you, it sounds like you're probably not all the way out in Concernville as far as Watkins goes?
No, I'm not terribly worried. I would have liked to see a little more progression, but even in his presser yesterday, you can tell that he's concise and that he's still working on learning the playbook, knowing where he's supposed to be, let alone the physical things that I think will become muscle memory. But I do think he's going to work out. I don't think there's any reason to panic either.
I agree with that. Let's stay here on the side that feels to me currently like the safe, warm blanket on a cold day. Let's talk about the offense for just another second before we shift gears to the terrifying blizzard of the defense. But what do you think, going into the 3rd preseason game tomorrow, is the ceiling for the offense, maybe an optimistic prediction, what you think is most likely, and whatever you think the floor is, offensively?
I think offensively you could see multiple touchdown throws. You'd like to see 2-3 sustained drives where they can show that they can mix and match, run the ball some, but move the chains consistently and not, again, wait around to throw those deep bombs. Worse off, you could see multiple interceptions. And that is really what's going to be the toss-up here, at least for the next, I want to say 4, 6, 8 games of this season until Patrick Mahomes kind of settles down. And I think you'll see that progression. But I think probably the average in there is probably something you're going to see. He's going to throw a touchdown or 2, and he's probably going to throw a pick.
I think that's fair, and I think that's fair for for this game? What about for the season as a whole? If you apply the same question to the larger scale, what is it that you're expecting for the long term of this season?
I think we saw, especially in Denver, and what we've seen to this point so far, I think there's a reasonable expectation that he pushes to have the kind of yardage totals that Alex Smith had last season. Clearly, the deeper balls are easier for him. I think we'll see a lot more of them. I also think that we're going to see probably 2 to 3 times the number of interceptions that Smith threw. So it's going to be up and down. I think he will have a solid season as a starter, but I think it'll only scratch the surface of what we can see in another 24 or 36 months.
I like that. And on the defensive side of the ball, I wonder if, I'll let you just fill in the blank. Currently, you're feeling blank about the state of the Chiefs' defense.
Oh, a nervous tick, maybe? That's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, that feels right. Yeah.
I mean, take your pick, right? Pass rush, corner coverage, how they can play deep coverage with the safety crew, getting a brand new corner into the top 3 with Nelson still out, your D-line's injured. There's a whole lot of questions there.
The only thing you didn't mention is the inside linebackers, and I've actually been feeling the same way. It's looked bad through weeks 1 and 2 because there's been no Ragland or Hitchens, but I expect those guys to step in and immediately make the middle of that defense so much better. But as of right now, what is your largest concern?
I just want to see production out of the pass rush of the guys that aren't named Houston. I think that can cover up some of the inadequacies in the back end of the defense. It can give them a chance to stay competitive early until some of those younger guys can get up to speed, or maybe Scandrick can get up to speed, and hopefully you get some of the injured guys back, including Barry, which I know they're optimistic about, but until I see it, I can't really believe it.
Yeah, where are you at with Eric Berry right now? What's your level of concern with him at this point?
The lights aren't red, but they're yellow. I would not be surprised to find out that he comes back next week and is ready to go through a couple of snaps. And on the flip side, I wouldn't be surprised if they're overly cautious and maybe he misses a game or 2 of the regular season. I'm hoping they just don't push it to the point where, hey, we have a regular season game against the Chargers. We got to play him, period. Maybe he's not ready for that. I don't want to see another re-injury.
I'm with you on that, but this is why I'm really wondering what the plan is from the Chiefs, because he was out there at the beginning of training camp, and then the soreness comes back. And I understand there's no reason for him to be playing for the preseason with the soreness there, but it seems like the Chiefs are trying to sell us on the idea that more rest is going to make his Achilles health or his heel health or whatever is going to make it not impenetrable, but at least make his chance for re-injury or just injury in general much less. But I'm not sure if that logic checks out, Ryan. What are you expecting from a few more weeks of rest whenever it comes to soreness that pops back up after a few days of work?
Well, I think it's not the soreness. The soreness is an indication of something structural, right? In a tendon rupture like that, that's the big question. And it's whether they can find some proactive treatments to lessen the tension on that particular tendon, or if they have some kind of diagnostic imagery or something that I don't know about that they feel like they can narrow it down. I'm hoping they're trying to give it rest in order for it to calm down. Maybe it's an aggravation they feel, but I think Rick Burkholder's as good as they come in this league in treating injuries, and if they can prevent them, even better. But I am a little bit concerned that whenever he does take the field, it's going to be a bit of a question mark, and whatever plan they have is going to be kind of feel it out as it goes when he's on the field.
Yeah, I'm worried about the logic of any of that, because I'm hopeful just as I'm concerned, I suppose. We've mentioned the secondary and Orlando Scandrick and everything. What did you make of the Chiefs going out and bringing in Scandrick, being the first team to visit with them, getting that deal done, adding him to the mix? Does that alleviate some of the stresses on you with the secondary, the cornerback position specifically? How are you feeling about it? How did Scandrick change it?
I feel like he is a great safety blanket. And when you heard Andy Reid talk about him, I think it's pretty evident that the familiarity that Andy Reid has with him is a big comfort. And Bob Sutton, with understanding that he's a savvy vet and he understands how the game is played, and that can overcome some of the athletic deficiencies probably. And if they can then allow him to be the bridge that either gets Steven Nelson back or is the emergency break glass guy if something either doesn't pan out with David Amerson or you have another injury at the position, I think he's great for that. If they have to ride with him for 16 games as an outside corner, I think this is going to be a long season.
Yeah, I'm terrified, Ryan. I am so scared. I think, and here's the thing that's frustrating to me is all of that. Like, I feel like we're talking about things that we've been saying for months. Like, whenever the Chiefs traded for Kendall Fuller, there was 25 minutes of belief that Fuller and Peters would coexist on this team and crush it, and then Peters gets traded. We've talked about that ad nauseum. But I feel like this has been something that they've I don't know, half-assedly addressed for a while. What do you make of the way that Brett Veach has attacked the defensive overhaul in many ways throughout this offseason, both in the context of the secondary where they haven't made investments and then throughout the front seven where they have?
I feel like his theme of getting nastier, getting stronger, getting more aggressive in the front is justified. Unfortunately, I think he's trying to get away from that on the back end because Peterson in the past had gotten burned sometimes taking chances. We all know about the tackling.
Yes.
I think what they feel like in the back end is they want more of a steady presence and not as much aggression and risk-taking, not the Terrence Mitchells who might give you a couple of good plays and then let everybody run past you the rest of the game. So I think they're being a little more cautious and conservative in the back end to try to keep things in front of them. I'd like to see them play a little more cover two with this particular lineup that they have, but I don't know that Bob's going to change. We'll have to see about that.
Okay, so I think that is a great breakdown. I think you're reading that situation perfectly. Now, a different question. Do you think that is the right strategy? Get really nasty in your front seven and then have the secondary keep everybody in front of you. Is that the right strategy for a football team in 2018?
No, I can't stand that sit back and wait Tampa 2 style secondary play. But unfortunately, players that can both press and mirror down the field are getting harder and harder to find. And especially the college guys that come out that are so handsy and are not able, once you take that away from them at the NFL level, that they're not able to compete any longer. And that's problematic. And I don't know if it's a tendency or a reliance on the staff to rely on Al Harris to coach these guys up and make that transition. It'll remain to be seen, especially with Springs and Smith. Can they get there? Because I think they both make this roster, and if they do, the way these injuries are lining up and the other question marks, they may see time rather sooner than later.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance of that. Was your interest piqued by the Raiders cutting Melifonwu?
Well done. Better than I could do.
I've tried it many times, and I've failed more often.
I found it interesting only because he's a high-round pick for a year removed. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he fits in Kansas City. He's such an atypical athlete for the safety position. Could he be a nickel linebacker?
Yeah.
Probably. But that's what the Chiefs brought in Dorian Daniel to do. So I don't know that there's any reason for the Chiefs to look at him.
The comp to Dorian Daniel is really interesting, and especially because I look at the safety position as this place that is just filled with terror, as I've said many times already today. But with a guy with that atypical athleticism and size, to drop a 6'4" dude beside hopefully Eric Berry, maybe Eric Murray, I don't know. I feel like you say, could he be a nickel linebacker? Maybe. My thought is, could he be Daniel Sorensen? And my response would be, I don't know, maybe so. And also, it's not that he has to beat out Daniel Sorensen the first few weeks. There is no Daniel Sorensen. And right now, it's like Leon McQuay or Tremont or Armani Watts, like guys that don't have the playing time yet. And so it's one of those things where also I look at Brett Veach and I see that as being something that maybe would make some sense for him. Because of Reggie Ragland and Cam Irving, those trades and stuff, finding those guys that have overstayed their welcome in their previous spot and then come to Kansas City for a fresh start.
I wouldn't argue with you there, but I think it's less about Obi and more about Brett Veach. I think Dave Toth said something interesting the other day in his presser about some of the special teams guys that he feels are going to catch on at other teams once they're cut. And then he said, or they could be traded. I know Brett's looking at that.
Yes,
so
I heard that. Yes.
Really interesting, right? To foreshadow like that. I got to think that safety is probably one of the primary positions that Brett Veach is looking at. Maybe with George Iloka going so quickly to Minnesota, that may have been an option before. Maybe that's something that a trade's the only way they can get somebody that can actually help them.
Yeah, and I at this point, I sort of expect something, and it's really fresh into the Brett Veach era still. Like, it's a little over a year now, but it's still a pretty small sample size to know about his strategy. But I think John Dorsey's trademark became trading for or picking up guys at the waiver wire, on the waiver wire at the end of roster cuts and everything. And in his first year, he had the first waiver priority throughout all of that, so that helped. But is it fair to think that right now that Brett Veach's staple might be finding guys like that to get it for a decent value in the trade market?
I think so, and especially when you realize that he's relying on his evaluations when they came out in the draft. And so if there are other players that might be stuck on the depth chart, they're good places to look. Mm-hmm. I would not be surprised, by the way, that Obi might be a guy that John Dorsey was pretty high on, so Hard Knocks, watch out. But I'd like to see Veach continue down that path, and I think he's got gems that he feels, with his ties with the coaching staff, that he's in a unique position to really take those chances and get guys for cheap contracts that he feels and the staff feels they can coach up and turn into players. It just takes time.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing to be with this group, because you believe in your coaching staff. Like, I would think rightfully so. Like, this might be one of the best situations on football for a guy like that. So I think that's great. So we've talked about the big picture stuff. We talked about a little bit what you expect to see tomorrow, at least offensively. We're getting closer and closer now, about a week out from the full roster cut downs. Is there anybody that you think is a good candidate to end up getting cut that would be a surprise? And do you have an interesting candidate maybe for a guy who will make the roster that could be a surprise?
You know, a surprise might be a long shot for Ben Neiman now, but I think he's certainly outplayed Terrence Smith to this point. And I think they can look at him as a guy, again, through Dave Toth's comments, that can play special teams for them, that can shore up in case of emergency and play with the team in a league way. It should anything happen with Hitchens and Ragland. You know, a surprise cut, I find it difficult to see whether they can keep Frank Dombo this year. He's been a guy who is stuck on this roster because of his versatility. And now with two young guys behind Ford, I think this might be finally be the time where they have to say we can't afford to carry him.
Yeah. You mentioned the pass rushers earlier, and you said you want to see something behind Justin Houston, or something from someone who's not Justin Houston. And I think obviously everyone would agree with you on that, including Brett Veach, because the last 2 years the Chiefs have picked pass rushers very highly. And Passanio had the year of sort of development. Speaks, we'll see what he's getting, but that is where I want to get your perspective on this, Ryan. Which of those guys, not named Justin Houston, do you expect the most from this season?
You know, I like what we've seen from Tano Passanio to this point. He looks like he's getting it. Looks like he's set the edge a little bit, especially in game one. But I think really the guy with more upside to be productive in this defense is probably Speaks. When you look back at how Tamba played the game, not the fastest edge guy, but came with power, played with aggression, and I think you see those similarities in Speaks. And if he can get better with his hand fighting, if he can get better at countering his first move when the tackler or the guard understands what he's doing, I think you're going to see him in maybe the second half of the season start to break through and actually be able to produce, because his power is good, and I think he's got a lot of potential.
I agree with you on the potential. I hope we see it happening this season. I feel like I've accepted a bit of delayed gratification with how they treated Passanio last year, but they've got the need for a guy that can move people around right now. And neither of us have even dared to bother mentioning Dee Ford. And as depressing as that is, it also feels kind of right.
Well, but at the same time, they need anybody to step up, and it might be Dee Ford.
Yes.
I feel like it might be better for him because what we've seen, especially as camp wound down, that he was playing mostly on the left-hand side of the defense, and Justin had flipped over. Mm-hmm. That puts D in his comfort zone in a place where we saw him be productive when Houston was out. And I think that's probably the best scenario for D to be able to contribute. And if that's true and you lose a little bit of production because Justin doesn't like being over there as much, okay, that's fair. But 2 pass rushers is better than 1 any day.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan, we got to let you go. Tell everybody where they can get Locked On Chiefs, what's coming up next, everything that people need to know about where to get more of you.
You can get the Locked On Chiefs podcast with me and Seth and Chris Clark anywhere where you can get podcasts, iTunes, Google Play especially. And check out RGR Football on YouTube. That's the new thing that I'm doing. And appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. That's Ryan Tracy. He's at Ryan Tracy NFL on Twitter. That's the only thing he didn't plug that I will plug because I am the master of plugging Twitter accounts, usually my own at JB Briscoe. All right, we got to take a break. You're listening to Almost Entirely Sports here on ESPN Kansas City.